So it's wonderful to have you all here with us celebrating the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. But before starting, we first want to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet. We pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognize their valuable contribution to Australian and global society. So today, me and Emily are going to be the host of this event. So I'm Charlotte, and I'm a PhD candidate at the Center for Crop Science.
Hi everyone, and I'm Emily. I'm a PhD candidate at the Center for Animal Science.
So this day is an opportunity to reflect and see how far we have come in the inclusion of women in science. We are lucky to be surrounded by amazing researchers and leaders, and there's no doubt they are amazing role models to the rest of us. We hope in future years, we will have more gender equal roles in science, and the next generation will picture themselves as scientists with no gender barriers. For our audience, remember that you can leave us all your questions in the Q&A chat. And without further ado, Emily will introduce our amazing panelists who happen to be Wonder Women in Science. Let's go.
Thank you, Charlotte.
No
Thank
worries.
you. Hi, everyone. So I'm pleased to introduce first Professor Nina Meader. She is the director of the Center for Horticultural Science at QAAFI and director of the Australian Research Council Industrial Transformation Research Hub for Sustainable Crop Protection. She developed BioClay, a revolutionary environmentally sustainable alternative to chemicals and pesticides for crop protection. Welcome, Nina.
Thanks, Emily. Thank you.
Next up, we have Professor Christine Beveridge. She's the director of the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for Plant Success in Nature and Agriculture. She's the leading plant scientist who is researching ways to future-proof crops around the world. She discovered the plant hormone strigolactone, and the sugar signaling is the driver of shoot branching. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Dr. Marina Fortes. She's a senior lecturer at the School of Chemistry and Molecular Biosciences here at UQ, where she also leads her livestock genomics lab. She also has been involved in the production of UQ's very own Women in Science podcast. Welcome to Nina, Christine, and Marina. How are you today?
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining us. We want to use this space wisely and start a conversation about breaking barriers in science, the skills that take to grow a successful career despite all adversities, and how do we juggle it all? So we're going to go back in time a bit, and I would like you to reflect on how historically women have been perceived in science in your respective country of origin, and whether this has changed over the years. So I guess we can start with Nina. Would you like to give it a go?
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. And thanks for asking a historical question. Sometimes we just get lost in what is happening today, but it's the rich history that we bring into, what we are today that makes a huge difference, especially when we talk about women in general and women in science as well. So thank you for this very nice question. So when I think of India, whether historically or today, with India, there are two major things. There's the rural India, and then there's the metropolitan India. And rural India is a huge, very different equation that happens there compared to what is metropolitan India or the metropolitan cities. So when I was growing up, rural India, it wasn't about science. It was about to be able to go to school. To have a school where a girl can attend, to be able to empower those families, to enable the girls to go to school. So it was about the basic right to education at that time for girls. Whereas in metropolitan India, when I was in school or I was doing my year 12, to be honest, and I was trying to think, I did not perceive a difference between science and arts. And it could be just my personal, situation of the school. I had friends, we were doing biology or maths or science and looking at becoming either teachers or Traditionally, teachers or a doctor. Engineering was still a little bit, where the gender divide will come, and maths and physics was definitely where the gender divide was a bit more pronounced. And if I look at it today, I must say that there is a progress in both rural and metropolitan India. Of course, India is a huge country. So maybe there are still drops in the ocean, but at least those drops are falling in that ocean. Rural India, there is very much an awareness and campaigns that it's absolutely essential to educate girls. And by doing that, you're not just educating a girl, you're educating a family and educating a nation. So those kind of things are happening. I do, look at the net quite often in that space, and I find the campaigns have changed. It's not about doing a cooking gas supply to a household. Now you hear maybe the women should get laptop, maybe the women should get, digitally connected. Just having those conversations around, and of course science is featuring as well in those conversations. So still very small steps, but those are happening. Metropolitan India, again, I think that change is there. I was looking at a few examples, prompted by your question, actually. So it was not that as if I knew all that, but I did do a little bit of thing, and I found, absolutely powerhouse CEOs there. So CEO of Flex is a woman. She's on the board of, Uber and Catalyst. She's an Indian woman now. There is a woman who is the CEO of Vertex Pharmaceuticals. To those of the girls attending this, or, to everyone, actually, the CEO of Match Group, if it interests you, a 40 billion technology conglomerate who talks about Tinder and Cupid or Hinge or Plenty of Fish, is a woman. The CEO of French Chanel is an Indian woman, and they are all engineering graduates. They are all in their 50s. So, 50s or, early to mid 50s. So they must have graduated, the time that we were graduating, or maybe little later. So what I'm seeing is that change there now. Definitely that change is still not enough. And definitely there's still a divide of women being in leadership position to women being not in leadership positions, and we'll come to that later. So yeah, that's my historical journey from an Indian perspective.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nina, for sharing that. How about you, Christine?
Yeah, thanks again for organising this event. Yes, I grew up in Tasmania, in the north part of Tasmania. It's a very, very conservative part of Australia. And I actually don't think as a child I actually knew any women that, were professionals running, I don't know, businesses or were leaders as such in their community. But the GP I went to was a male. There wasn't anyone in the family or extended family that no women were doing anything of that sort. So it was quite an interesting time. It wasn't that members of the family or others would say, what to me, why would you go to university? But I actually remember as a child, well, maybe I was 16, sitting in the lounge room of a friend's house talking about what we're going to do. And the older brother said to me, Dad said that no daughter of mine is going to university. So, and that's not that long ago. I'm in the early 50s sort of age group. When I did go to university, 100% of the lecturers were male. I went to university because my family said, because my options were, as far as I understood it, I could be a teacher, I could be a nurse, or I could be a secretary. Anyone who knows me, I'm not organised enough to be a secretary, and I don't like blood, so I guess teaching was the thing. So I went to university to become a teacher, and there were men there who eventually, one man really encouraged me to do research, and it was that tap on the shoulder which opened my eyes to that opportunity. So I did a little research project, and that got me really excited, and I was wow. And so that man really in Murfitt, ended up being my supervisor for my PhD. He really encouraged me. So I think when women have somebody somewhere along the line that sort of taps them on the shoulder, I think it makes a huge difference. And I think that, you know, if there's one thing we can all do as individuals is encourage that tapping on the shoulder thing, and encouraging the males around us to do it to females as well. And a lot of males do that, but we need to do a lot more of it. I think nowadays, you know, when I look at the school that I'm in, biological sciences, there's a lot of women there, but there's much fewer at the senior levels. So we still, you know, I'm still often sitting in a room full of men. I guess Nina would be too, when I'm at a meeting. So, you know, I think it's just important for us to recognise that I think if your environment around you has been of a certain type, that it does influence the way you frame your mind and the way you consider the opportunities around you. And that's going to change enormously according to the environments you've had. So if your parents are academics, you've got male and female, that's going to be a lot different than if you live, you know, in suburban Australia and, you know, your GP is a male, if that makes sense. Yeah. I think tapping on the shoulder is my point there. Thanks.
Thank you, Christine. That's very insightful, and it's very true. Some of us still are the very first scientists in our families. And, you know, we can only see it evolving from here and us being the ones inspiring the next generation. And I'll now move on to Marina. And yeah, can you share with us?
Sure. My story, I think, is a little bit different from Nina's and Christine's, because I was hearing your stories and I realized I had this privilege of having both a mother and a father who valued education, had been to university, and told me from a very young age that I had to go to university. It was not an option. You have to do this. The only choice is which course do you want to do, but you're going to go to university. So if I want to talk about the historic perspective in Brazil, probably the easiest is to share a bit my family story, because I think it's common and it's example of, and Nina said there's a difference between rural and urban and metropolitan. So my other privilege is that I grew up in São Paulo city, which is a very big city with lots of opportunities. And so that is very different from rural Brazil, right? But still, if I think about my grandmother, she wanted to play the piano and she was not allowed, not even that. My grandfather told her, you're my wife, you're not gonna work. End of story. And he was a doctor, you know. Anyway, my mom was much better in terms that she was allowed to have a career, have a job, but still the household and the kids were very much her responsibility. So she worked part-time. So I'm the first one that works full-time. And that's, so you can see the differences in the generations, right? And I do think we are finally having a place at the table. I'm looking at your question and you're saying, has it changed? I think it has changed a lot, but there is still a lot of change to happen. And that's in the leadership roles. That's where so we are here, we're doing science, but very few women have gotten to leadership positions. That's the next change that I think should happen. Yeah, that's my little story.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing all of this to us. And so now the next level is like, me and Emily, we're gonna be freshly PhD graduates soon. So how did you decide you wanted to pursue an academic position? And how was the experience of becoming a research leader at the University of Queensland? Nina, you want to start?
Okay, no worries. Thanks again. So yeah, for me, as Christine and Marina has shared, a little bit of my career also, you know, as everyone's career gets influenced by your family. So I grew up in Delhi. We were a refugee family from when India-Pakistan partition happened, and my, grandfather moved from Lahore to Delhi and started building his family from scratch, absolute scratch. But one thing that happened when I was growing, and I grew up in a very large extended family, you know, with uncles and aunts, but women in my family were very strong. They had all gone to university. Even my grandma had gone to year 12, you know, so which was a really big thing for me. Another thing that was there was agriculture, and that's where I segue into my career. And you know, after finishing PhD and academic, agriculture was kind of, my grandfather was so used to tell me stories how important food is, and everything revolves around, you know, providing that food on the plate. You can do anything else, but if the food is not there, life is not theirs, kind of a message. So I pretty much grew very much right from early childhood that I'm going to, you know, to revolutionize agriculture or whatever, but I'm going to be an agriculture scientist. I'm not going to become a teacher. I'm not going to become a doctor. I will pursue that career. So my PhD, from botany honors in Delhi to the PhD that I did in agricultural science. And then I did my first postdoc in UK in the Humberside region, working on cucumber and tomatoes. And maybe that also, what it taught me was, what really taught me the kind of different problems that we had in India compared to what I was seeing there. It was an absolutely different set of challenges. So I went back, finished my postdoc, didn't stay in UK, went back and served for 10 years in India before I moved to Australia. So I did join the Agricultural Research Service, and I really had this vision, you know, of doing innovations that can make a big change. That thought wasn't maybe articulated at that time like that in my mind, but working wise, that was the thought. So I did do that, and then moved to the University of Queensland in the year 2000. So I didn't come here as a young, you know, bushy-eyed ponytail girl. I came here as a very mature woman with a 2.5-year-old, 2 suitcases, husband without a job, trying to start my career here at UQ as a research academic, gave my 10-year of senior position, started here as a postdoc level. But I think what the message from me is, as long as you enjoy your work and you have that honesty and passion about it, you will find a way. There will always be obstacles. There always will be difficulties. But I can recollect that my first 4 years when I was a postdoc, maybe it was the best time that I had at UQ, because I was like doing research which I couldn't do in India. I was excited at seeing a plant grow, and, you know, having that resistance to diseases, seeing them. That was a very beautiful phase that set up the scene for me, that yes, I do want to be an academic, and I can still deliver things which will make a meaningful difference. And that sort of tried to stay true to that path today.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you so much, Nina. I loved everything you said. Thank you. Christy?
Yeah.
Do you have any tips and insight and anything that we can learn from you?
Yeah, thanks. Look, this issue about, you know, at the end of the PhD, I think I mentioned earlier that even before that, you know, I was encouraged to do an honours project and then a PhD. And I think that's where I just absolutely loved the science. I just loved it. And I thought, wow, this is like being an explorer, you know, it's like, you know, there are things I could relate to in my life, you know, discovering something from scratch, so something new, and contributing to the world with something new is just a gift, you know. It's just an amazing thing to be able to spend your life to do that. So I just thought of it a bit like, I thought of myself a bit like an athlete, you know. I'll just work as hard as I possibly can and see if I can get there, you know. And then actually it wasn't as hard as I had imagined, because I went to France, and when I went to France for 2 years as a postdoc, my first postdoc, and I met a whole bunch of women there who really changed my sort of identity in a way. I suddenly realized, hang on, there's a stack of women here and they're all, you know, fun and having children and lives and all the rest of it. You know, they had everything. And it was really obvious to me that, you know, this is really a potential career. And that gave me even more enthusiasm. I made a lot of really great friends there. And then was fortunate to come back to UQ on a UQ fellowship. And, you know, back here, it was like, yeah, well, still most of the people around me were men, but there was one woman, Krista Critchley, who was head of department actually at one time. And she had her own style and very different from mine, but it was a very unique and very a style that one could look up to. So she was a good role model. And I think now we've got a lot of great role models actually, haven't we? We've got our Dean, the Science, we've got our DVCR and our VC. So, you know, there's certainly plenty of people to look up to. In terms of how did it feel like at UQ, I got a ALC fellowship funded at one time, and I was so uncertain that it was true that I actually ran to the research office and made them show me on their system that it was true. So somebody asked before about imposter syndrome in the chat or somewhere, and I think, you know, it's certainly possible that you can be very successful and still feel like an imposter. I think it's possible that, in fact, feeling like an imposter sometimes makes you work even harder. UQ, actually, to be very supportive. There were individuals who certainly have done the wrong thing and haven't been held to account in the way that I would like it to be. However, when I decided to have a child and I decided I wanted to go part-time, and I wanted to keep doing my research while I was on maternity leave. And then when I came back, I wanted to keep being part-time. So I said, you know what, I'd like to be part-time that whole time. And you know what, I don't want to do any teaching because that would be inconvenient because I can't come in and so on with the baby and everything. But I'd like to be able to write some papers and a grant. What do you think? And the head of school said, sounds good to me. And so, you know, it was an incredibly flexible scenario that I had. And I just think that, you know, if we ask the questions with a right, you know, reasoning there, you know, sort of logical explanation, because often the person on the other side of the table doesn't really relate to you, you know, your situation. So you've got to explain to them, well, you know, this is my life, this is my situation, these are my needs. You know what? I want to be a brilliant scientist. The best way for you to help me do that and help me work really hard for UQ is that if I had these things. And then they go, oh, well, that makes sense. There you go. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it a little bit, but I think that, you know, science is actually a career that's extremely flexible. There's periods of it where you can work intensely. For example, you know, your first postdoc, you might be in a foreign country with no family around to distract you or whatever. Or, you know, it might be, yeah, there's just different stages in their career where you can do things and you can change your pace of your research at times in your life where you need that pace, you know? So you don't have to be firing on all cylinders all the time. You can have quiet times and that's fine. You know, if you make a conscious decision, you know what, I'm not going to get, you know, a stack of papers out this year. I'm going to focus on my family or on some other thing in my life. That's fine. You know, tell the people around you that's your plan, and then enjoy it. I think if I compare it with my partner who was partner in a law firm, you know, they didn't have that sort of flexibility at all, you know. Not really. Yeah, anyway, so that's my sense of what it was like at UQ. I certainly felt like an imposter to start with, and I'm gradually getting used to it.
Oh, me too.
So much.
Yeah,
So,
I definitely felt an imposter in the beginning.
So thank you so much, Christine. So Christine mentioned flexibility on the workplace, but we also have passion for science. How about you, Marina? What was like your key driver?
Definitely the passion for science and for doing research, and a bit like Nina Meader, agriculture, and this idea that we need to feed the world in order to have a peaceful world. It's always my motivation, and Christine is going like that. So I think we're all in ag science for a reason, isn't it? We see a big purpose that we are trying to achieve. And it was during my PhD. So I did vet science first. So in the beginning of my life, I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. I didn't think I was going to be a scientist. But trying to be a cattle vet in Brazil was where I got a lot of obstacles. You know, you're small, you're female, you're not going to be able to handle cattle, which is nonsense. But they kept giving me desk jobs, you know. So I thought, I'm going to go back to study because this is boring. So I did a master, and then when I moved to Australia, that was when I did my PhD. And it was during my PhD that I realized how much I actually loved research and how much I actually loved genomics. Because it was I was very lucky. I was doing my PhD right at the time that genomics was starting for cattle, when the SNP chip technology had been launched. The cattle genome was the cover of Science. So it was very inspirational to be doing the PhD at that time. And my husband was doing a PhD at the same time as I was. He was just 1 year ahead. We kept asking each other, how are we going to continue to do this thing that we love into the future? How, you know, and he always wanted to be scientist only. And so lucky him, he has a job at CSIRO and it worked. But my path was different because I always thought, well, probably I have to teach as well. I thought teaching is a way, as a means to an end. I want to be a researcher, I'm going to have to teach as well. The thing is, today I really love the teaching component as well. So it worked. But it was not a decision to be an academic. It was a decision, I love science, how can I keep doing it? And I was lucky that from PhD to postdoc, my supervisor introduced me to my next supervisor saying, you're looking for someone, my student is almost finished, she's great, take her. So that was easy, that transition. Then the next transition from postdoc to getting an academic job, it was a true process. Like, you know, there's a job advertisement, you put in your application together with everybody else, and you go through the selection process. And it was tough. It was very tough, especially because it happened the same year that I became a mom. So I did my interview with Rita being 15 days old, which was insane. But it worked because I had a very supportive husband. And because I think I am at this generation, I'm thankful and grateful for the trailblazers that came before me, Nina and Christine and so many others, and all the women who are now part of UQ professors. The system was already more flexible and they understood it. And when I told the interview panel that I had a baby that was coming to the interview with me because she might be crying, they were like, yeah, sure, no problem, you can bring her. You know, so, and I don't think if this was 30 years ago, it would be like, no, sorry, this is not for you then. Yeah, so I encountered a very supportive and flexible environment. They even allow me to finish my maternity leave and then take the position. I took it full time. In hindsight, I should have done what Christine did, take it part-time. But I was very eager to establish my group. So I tried very hard, and I learned the hard way that you actually need to rest sometimes. So my message, I guess, it is, if you're going to be an academic, use the flexibility to your advantage. And it's okay to take breaks, as long as you remember to come back, you know? I think that's the hard thing sometimes. As women, and if you're going to have a family, you might have this stop and start career. Just remember to come back and self-motivate to come back. And I guess what Christine said earlier, tap people on the shoulders and tell them, you can come back. I know you've done your maternity leave. How do you feel about coming back now? You know, I just been through this with one of my students, my RHD students. She needed to take time off, not because of children, but because her father was very sick. And she needed to look after him. And I kept tabs, you know, every few months I would write to her and say, how's everything? How are you going? And then finally, last week, she came back after a year, and she's gonna continue her work. You know, it's not a problem that you had to press pause because of life. If you somehow find the energy to come back and start again and continue the journey.
That's very insightful, Marina, and thank you so much for sharing that. As you can see in the comments, it was very different many years ago, from permissions to work and disclosing that you were married or that you were intending to have kids. You know, we've come a long way. And one important thing that Barbara mentions here is she wishes that, you know, more opportunities had been available to older women as well. And I think that's one of the key things as well that we will be touching on further in our questions about where the leaky pipe, you know, takes place, and women need to be coming back to the academic life. Where are the opportunities there, and what can we do? So I guess I'll keep going on with our next question, is about the academic life and the sacrifices that come with it. I think mostly the mental burden of having to juggle it all, and it connects with the question that we have in our Q&A. Despite being a successful women in STEM, experiencing the imposter syndrome, you know, how do you handle this? And how can we stay grounded and balance, you know, these amazing jobs that we have with our normal life? How about Christine?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first to give Nina a break. It's always harder being the first one to answer the questions. Look, one analogy I sometimes use to think about my career and you know, my whole life is I think of my career a little bit like a small business. I think in academia it's a bit like that. You know, you don't really have a supervisor looking over your shoulder, you know, every day going this. And even when you're a postdoc, you know, you still may not be in that. You know, it's your baby, you're driving it. And I think, like I was saying before, you can go fast and slow and fast and slow. Now, nobody else around you can tell you when's the right time to do that. No one around you can tell you, you know, it's Friday afternoon, you're exhausted, your brain's not working, go home. You have to do that yourself. You have to know your own limits. And so I think it's about really knowing, first of all, what are you aiming for? And then second of all, when do you want to do it? And then, yeah, pacing yourself to that and being happy with the decisions you've made to do that and sticking to them if you like. Like, of course, you change your mind, but there's no point deciding to go home early on a Friday because you're tired and then sitting at home thinking, I really should be at work. That's a waste, you know. If you're having a child or you're having an interruption, you know, enjoy it. You know, make the most of that. Don't think, oh, I should be at work, you know. I think, you know, being honest with yourself about what you need and what you don't need, and when to do things, and when you're overloaded and when you're not. I think it's very important that you really look at yourself for that. Now, if you do have the heavy imposter syndrome thing, you might find that difficult because you'll go, well, I'm just not good enough. That's why I'm not doing that and that and that. So that's where your networking's important. Hang out with some other people at your career stage and see what they're doing, you know, and ask them if they feel like they're doing too much, you know. Remember, when you go for promotion or when you apply for a position, you don't need to be excellent at every single thing on the list. You know, the things are on that list because they're the whole spread of things which you can possibly be good at. And when they try to introduce these things, it's recognizing that people have different paces and people cover things at different times. Therefore, there's a big wide list, right? For example, you might emphasize your teaching early on in your career and then need to work harder on your research later on, or vice versa. So the balance of those things is going to change during your career. That's okay. So what you need to be in your head, I think, is to have a clear dialogue about why. Why did you make that decision? And, you know, can you sort of evidence-base it a little bit? You know, like I haven't done much research this year because I was part-time and I thought that I shouldn't let the teaching drop because the students really need that information, you know. I need to keep that quality up, you know. I chose to have 3 middle author papers during this period because I was concerned about my collaborations. I didn't want to let my collaborators down. And I deliberately left my first author paper to last on the list for that reason. For example, right? so just think about it. And my last thing I just wanted to say is that, look, we are all so different as people. We are all so different. So, that's why you need at least 3, probably 20 people to talk about this. You've got to find out what works for you. What are your strengths and what are the areas you need to improve? Balance that against your opportunities. Learn from a wide range of people if you can, and then don't try to copy anyone. Just pick the best of it all. Like it's okay to eat a little bit of lots of different pieces of cake when you're an academic, or one piece of cake. It's totally up to you. So that's something to keep in mind, that diversity, which I might add, one last thing, the more diverse the community around us is, I'm talking gender, I'm talking abilities, I'm talking cultural diversity, the whole works, age, everything, the easier it is for us to do all those things.
That's very insightful advice, and thank you so much, Christine. Many people can relate to what you just said on the comments, so that's very encouraging. And I remember one thing, reading on social media as well, just learning from other women that have handled maternity and pandemic and everything. They said it's perfectly fine to just leave on your CV, like I took this time for, maternity leave.
Absolutely.
This time paper delayed because of pandemic, it's completely fine and acceptable.
It's about focus. I think it's a sign of focus. I'm focusing on my 6-week-old baby, 100%. And I'm going to do so for a period of time. That's okay.
So career breaks, then, encourage, perfectly fine to do that and to be listed on your CV. So it's fine. Anything else that you would like to add, Nina or Marina?
Christine has really said very well and brought about that points of pace, and different stages of life will have different requirements. Different work life also will have different requirements. Like as you grow in your life with kids and moving to that old age, or have other requirements of taking care of your old parents. So that dynamics of your family life or your own personal life changes, and so does the work life changes. From an early postdoc, you may be starting to lead a group, or you may be working with industry, or whatever your career has grown into. So I think finding that balance, and what I have seen personally, and I can relate to that being a woman, is sometimes we really overthink. We put so much pressure on ourselves in thinking that procrastination, that thinking about, we already set our bar very high, that this is the right thing, doesn't matter, my child is crying. If my child is crying, do I go to work or I don't go to work? We start thinking about it rather than, taking a decision. I remember, as I mentioned to you, I came here with a 2.5-year-old child, coming from an extended family. And I remember standing in front of that, early childhood center fence, for looking through the fence, seeing, has she settled down, or is she still crying? And then that guilt, God, I have stood for half an hour near the fence, I haven't gone to my then running, pacing those steps from Margaret Crib to the John Hines building, on a stretch to see whether I can go and reach. So these are different stages of life. My advice would be, as Christine also said, please, don't put yourself under that lens of pressure, and have conversations. It's really important. We internalize so much that sometimes we don't come out. And if you don't come out, especially with the gender balance, sometimes you won't be understood. They may, you think people should understand without you telling them. Sometimes they don't. You have to articulate it. You have to put it in front of them, that this is my situation, this is what is happening, and this is what I would like to do. And once you do that, there could be, so that would be just that addition to what Christine very, very nicely said.
Beautiful.
If I may add just one more thing, because this conversation is great. So maybe a little bit of myth busting, like you said, how can we have grounded balance and normal life? Maybe we can't, and that's okay too. It's not, So maybe the pressure to say, oh, I have to be this, that, and the other all the time is a bit unrealistic. So to lower the pressure is to say, okay, part of my balance is that right now I'm doing this and I'm not doing that. It's
Yes.
not that all the time you're able to do everything.
Yes. Yeah.
We interviewed for the Women in Science podcast, the second season, a young woman called Annie Damian, and she described it like this, and I thought it was beautiful. She said, we have to define for ourselves. So I have to define for me what is my format of success and not let other people dictate what it is. So I'll give you a very silly word, but it's an example, right? I was told not too long ago, how about having a second child? It's okay, your career can cope with it. And I was like, oh, that's nice to hear, but is that my definition of success? Should I have another child right now? Or am I happy with a family of 3, and a family of 3 is plenty okay? You know, those things, and only you can know your own answer and own it. Because if you let other people tell you what you should be doing, there's always going to be more things to be done, more and more.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. And I think it also aligns with what it is to be a scientist. Because in science, very regularly, you find yourself in this situation of pursuing an idea that you are the only person on the planet thinks has any value. And you do the experiments and then you're able to demonstrate to everybody that it did have value. So I think belief in yourself is something that you really benefits enormously with science, and also with this balance of figuring out what you should be doing in your science. And on top of that, the other one is being organised. Like, once you've made a conscious decision that I'm going to, you know, for example, this is going to be a quiet year for me, what do I need to tick over that means that there's no disadvantage of that in the longer term? For example, is there a review I could write? For me, plant biology, are there some crosses that need to get done? Do I need to order some things? Do I need to maintain my relationship with a student? You know, be strategic about the decisions that you do make. So don't try to do it all, but do be a little bit smart about what things you drop and what things you don't, and what the long-term implications of that might be. And so for me, that'd be things like just maintaining somebody in the lab who knows how to do something, you know, in my current situation, you know. Very early on, it would be, making sure I had enough plant material, surviving for the next year and things like that. So, so organisation, I think, is a skill that we can, as women, I think probably we need a little more, let's face it, than the average, you know, than a lot of men, because we are balancing more stuff. So we have to be a bit more organised.
That's what I feel, the same, you know, that you kind of have to have your plan in place where there is like, okay, I'll take a break, but at the same time, I need to keep an eye on my network system to kind of be able to go back and touch on those connections and find a potential new job and sort of those things.
Yeah,
so,
I'm very reluctant to say you should work while you're on maternity leave. That wasn't my point. My point was just that where you have the opportunity and you're willing to take it up, just be careful. Don't just naively think that things will just sort of happen in the background. You know, you do need to prioritise a couple of things, and just be clear with yourself and your family about that. You know, might even be, for example, you might explain to your family, look, this particular conference is something that's really, really important to me. It's 12 months away. You know, let's figure out how I can make it to go to that conference, you know, because I'd love to do that. I enjoy it and it's important to me. So that might mean...
On the conference attendance thing, it's a nice little story. It was my supervisor, my PhD supervisor was a woman, and she had 2 kids. So she normalized for me this idea that, yes, she would spend extra money, but she would bring her mother and her kids to the conferences.
Yes.
So she could attend the conferences.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing the same. I brought my mother-in-law once, I brought my father once, and it happens to be very lovely because, you know, I can see my family, which is still very much in Brazil. And the grandparents were so happy to be able to look after this grandchild while I was giving a talk.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't pass out the opportunity to give a talk in an important forum, you know.
And I think for Nina and I and yourself, Marina, as we get more senior and all of us, we need to create opportunities at conferences to enable that, where people haven't got the opportunity to take their family members as well. And I think that's something we can do for women all around us, is to make sure conferences are providing those sorts of environments.
For one of them, I did have a scholarship from UQ, which paid for the grandmother to be there.
Yeah.
You know, so these systems are starting to appear, but I agree, we have to have more of these systems.
I think this is why we introduced it in the science faculty
about
a few years back. No, that's awesome.
Absolutely. And this, once again, you know, both as Christine and Marina is saying, I still feel if you talk about it, if you let people know, this is my situation, I would love to go to that conference, but I have a 3-month-old child. I don't mind going as long as I can take my child or my partner with me.
Yeah.
Then someone may, you know, will start maybe exploring, and there could be, you know, opportunities. Please don't decide in the negative right up front. Look, there's no way that I can go. If you feel that you can go, ways can appear. Just think about it and bring it into the front.
Thank you so much for sharing all this for our participants. I can see in the chat, they are really enjoying this, and you're doing such an amazing work. So we need to, because we are almost at the end, and we have still 2 questions, but I think I can combine these 2 questions and just do something amazing, and you can share with us. So
just give us your best advice.
Yes. So I'm gonna say now everything. And so we were talking before about this leaking pipeline of women in science. So what we want is like, what can we do better for you? Like, what do you think that we can do better to ensure that women that reach leadership position? But also, how do you see the future of collaboration becoming more gender equal and diverse within the field? And last, are women gaining more participation and visibility in STEM? Marina, you want to start? Since you're always last. So finally you can start.
So I have to start saying that I think we have participation now, which we didn't a few years ago, but the visibility is where it's lacking still. You know, so there are many situations that women are participating, are leading the research, are doing a lot of the work, but somehow they don't get the recognition that they should get, and they don't get the visibility. So I'll tell you something that I've seen I've seen it a lot. There are big groups with a big, very powerful professor who is the leader. And there are many women who are postdocs or who are very senior postdoc. And it becomes like that eternal postdoc syndrome, that person continues to be seen as a postdoc forever because she's working under a big name. Even though she has gotten her own grants, she has her own students, she's clearly leading at least as one component of why that group continues to be famous. And if we don't change the culture or the perception, and we continue to only see that person as a postdoc, she doesn't progress through the pipeline. And that becomes very frustrating, disappointing. And when that coincides with motherhood, you might think, well, it was not worth it. I'm not coming back to this. That's, for me, part of the leaking pipe is that situation. That so we do our PhD, we do our first postdoc, maybe second postdoc. Getting to your third postdoc, you're really thinking, okay, how can I make a career for myself? And if the whole system continues to see you as a postdoc and only that, it becomes very difficult. It's difficult even to get grants, and yeah. And then you have an interruption. You know, you see what I'm saying? That I think that's often what happens. How can we fix that? It's a very complicated and tricky question. I think there are many things that have to be done. There's not one silver bullet solution. So part of it is changing the culture. Part of it is us, how we describe ourselves. So if we can describe ourselves as an independent group leader, there's more chance that people are going to see you like that, instead of saying I'm such and such postdoc, you know? And then there's another tool that is a bit controversial, but I see popping up more and more, which is women-only positions. They are there to try and fix this problem. But sometimes, if you advertise only at level E, that's not where the women are disappearing. They are disappearing at level C. There is a gap
right.
there still.
Yep.
Yeah. Here are my 2 cents on that. Very complicated question.
Thank you.
Nina and
Thank
Christine,
you.
I want to hear from you.
Okay, thanks, Marina, and very rightly said. And I just wanted to be, and it's a great thing. See where we have come. We are today. You're these 2 wonderful, Emily and Charlotte, holding this forum and us talking about it. That's a change, you know. And someone said on the chat, we would like also to see the change that the people who are joined this chat group are not just females. You know, it has to be a diverse group who comes and listens to these forums. For that voice. So that's very important. Something we should also keep in mind, that conversation about gender, absolutely, but also be aware that we are not just masking it as a noise. People sometimes, you know, start seeing it as a noise and ignoring the real action and progress. So just have to be very careful, because the gender gap is still there. It still exists. We need to do, of course, you know, more in that space. And if I think of the female, you know, at university or academic life, retention of women, succession, and management and leadership positions exposure, these are all 3 key things. It's, you know, yes, leadership is important, retention is equally important, especially when we have already talked about career interruptions for women and how sometimes they don't want to come back, you know, they don't feel that there is an opportunity to come back to work after having kids or whatever be the interruption. So that retention is important, that succession is important. And I feel still, while men and women maybe enter the workforce in equal numbers, women do fall behind in promotions at the very step of that leadership stage ladder. So we really do need to make sure, as Christine initially in the very first set, tapping on the shoulder, talking, supporting as women, you know, supporting the women much more, having those wonderful mentoring, networking, supporting in a real sense, having those conversations is important. And just to end, because I know we are at the end of this, I am very much about diversity and inclusion. So I would just like to say a culture of conscious inclusion, you know, not just a paper inclusion saying, oh, this interview panel is being made. We must have a women. So, you know, let's find this women and put it on that interview panel. You know, for me, the best outcome would be a day when we don't have to think about it, you know, when it's not, let's have, you know, we have to look for how many women scientists are attending this, or women speakers are giving a talk at this conference, and then looking at it. I'm really positive that girls like you and the others on the chat will reach that future. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nina. How much longer have we got? Have you got time for another comment?
Yes, go for it, please. Okay. Please.
Yeah, just in relation to the leaky pipeline, just adding to the comments that Nina and Marina have said, I just have one hypothesis that it might influence the leaky pipeline, and that is this perception that to be a good scientist, you have to move. And a lot of women don't want to move. I mean, you know, the kids, especially if you've got children, you know, and they're in a particular school or a particular environment, you just don't want to move. And, you know, and you can, it's possible to move, and you should, of course, do that if that's what you'd like to do. But I'm spending a lot of energy whenever anybody says, oh, that candidate's not as good because they don't want to move, you know, nepotism. People talk about let's hire people from UQ because that's nepotism. Well, if they're the best appointment, hire them, you know. don't use whether they're willing to move as a criteria. I think it's completely wrong. I don't know that there's any evidence to say that moving enhances your capacity as a scientist. What enhances your capacity as a scientist is your ability to learn new techniques and to collaborate interdisciplinarily, absolutely. And when you move, you serendipitously will achieve that. But we're in a massive university that's extremely multidisciplinary. So it's not hard to find a different research environment. You just have to walk 200 metres and you'll find a different research environment. So I think we've got to stamp that whole idea out. I think it's ancient, it's wrong, and it's not even real. So, but I think it affects women dramatically. It's just got to be removed from our thoughts. So local appointments are fine. And then I think identifying the men around us who are good at being mentors and really getting them to help tap people on the shoulder, help them think about where they're at. And I think women, generally speaking, don't put themselves forward. Marina and Nina both talked about this. I think if somebody taps you on the shoulder and says you should, and it makes such a big difference. I think it does for men and women, but particularly for women. And I think that it's okay if women want to take the pace a little bit slower, or men do. That's okay too. But really, it'd be nice to have an environment where the men are looking after the kids as much as the women. So really, there should be a leaky pipeline on both sides. So I think that's the other thing we've got to fix, is there should not be any prejudice against any male who wants to stay home and look after family members, whether they be parents, whether they be nephews, whether they be their own children. They should be totally encouraged to do that. And I in fact, really encouraged to do it. So I think that's another affirmative action point we could be making.
Yeah, we want to be empowered in the workforce, and to do that, they need to be empowered in the home front. That's
Absolutely.
how I like to say it.
Absolutely, yes. So choose your partner very wisely. That's
Yeah.
another.
It's essential.
That is important.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for sharing, to be role models for us, and thank you so much for sharing everything with us. And thank you. I just want to thank you, all the participants. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone, for interacting with us and to listen to us and to, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for organising. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was very nice.
That's all right. I'm sure we all will take away some important life lessons and tips to implement in our respective careers. And obviously, final message for everyone: don't be scared to be yourself in science, because it is evolving. There is gonna be, it can only improve from here. And with that message, I think we're good to finish the seminar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Just a message. This webinar was recorded and obviously will be shared. The link will be shared with everyone.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and have a nice weekend as well, since it's Friday.
Thanks.
You too.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.
Bye.